Moving into some zero RB targets for 2022, the listeners will want to know who we're targeting. Last year, my favorite player, I thought at one point I had overdrafted him, was James Conner. Both him and Leonard Fournette are, as Shawn quoted here, have gone to the land of overpriced toys. It sounds like something out of Toy Story, but who are kind of round 8 to 12 backs to build out a zero RB draft. Then we're looking at guys like Penny, who we're obviously big fans of, who came through strong last year. We have Devin Singletary as well, who's a relatively good value. How should we see them after those blazing finishes that we had? Can they start the season like that, or are they starting to get a little bit too expensive even at their current spots?
To me, those guys you mentioned, they look attractive at their current price because, I don't know, tell me if you think I'm wrong, but in different, years of playing fantasy, Penny and Singletary coming off of their seasons and specifically really hot finishes, we know how much recency bias kind of drives next year ADP. Like, I'm kind of shocked that those guys aren't 5th, 6th round ADPs right now. And so the fact that the market is, rightfully being cautious about their spots, but in a way they wouldn't have, in years previous, to me, I don't mind those guys there. And I actually think that range you mentioned, 8th, 9th, 10th, 11th round, I'm looking at an FFPC board right now. Those guys are nice. Even Kareem Hunt, going in the 8th round of a recent never too early draft, he was a guy that was routinely going in the 5th and 6th round last year in the offseason. So yeah, a lot of these guys that, whether through their pass catching upside or just their route to leading, a prolific rushing attack in Penny's case, I think they are all really nice picks. And it's another reason why I feel so comfortable kind of hammering, wide receivers through the 5th, 6th, and 7th rounds, just knowing that those guys are there.
Yeah, they really feel like the guys when we touched on earlier in the show that we could see come August, those guys get steamed up draft boards, particularly if the Bills don't draft a running back. We'll see Singletary move quite considerably, I think. So it's going to be interesting to see the situation around Carson and the Seahawks, along with Penny, and then obviously Singletary. The other situation that is Shawn's monitoring very closely as a Chiefs fan, and obviously we're all Ronald Jones fans. We're part of that club, and we cannot leave. But you took CEH on Underdog in that recent draft that Shawn mentioned. Should we be taking him as a target over Rojo? Is there hope that Rojo can break out this year, or should we have faith that it might eventually happen for CEH?
Yeah, and so this pick is this isn't the funnest answer, but it's like, this is my only share of CEH. It was also, until the other day too, my only Elijah Mitchell share, because these guys normally go much higher than I'm willing to take. Then you get into RotoViz, friends and family draft, and they're dropping 20, 30, 40 picks past ADP. I start to be like, okay, maybe this is my chance to get my exposure to these guys there. So yeah, I mean, I think I'm going to end up having way more Rojo this season, just because I assume he's going to be the cheaper of the two. Maybe, steam and sentiment will change on that, but I like the idea of taking the cheaper of the Chiefs running backs. However, in this spot, do I think the actual probabilities of Ronald Jones, being the lead back there are that much greater than CH? I don't. I think it's probably closer to a coin flip. So in a spot like this, if I can play the other side of the coin flip in a cost-effective way, I was happy to do that there.
Yeah, I thought you were going to say that you were going to have more Ronald Jones this year because you're drafting with Pat Curran most of the time, but I thought that would be the other reason.
Yes, that's too. I mean, when you have a highlight clip for a player, that also tends to drive us to drafting them, because then people want to see the highlight clip. So when you don't know who to draft, you just say, who do we have highlight clips for? We'll just draft them.
Yeah, you have to give the people what they want. But the other place to look is Miami. Seems to have got a little bit quiet around Miami. Obviously, kind of this time last year, there was a lot of talk around the wide receivers, and Will Fuller had went there and things like that. But we're really looking at the running backs and how to play them this year. Is there anyone exciting you in that Miami backfield?
Yeah, I mean, another guy in that range who I've ended up with a lot is Chase Edmonds. And, early in the offseason, before the Chase Edmonds news, I was drafting a ton of Mostert late in the 17th, 18th round, just kind of, still believing in his talent and that he would get another shot somewhere. And I just kind of, it's rare for that archetype that you're excited about, who's a older, injury prone late round guy. But if there's still, if he's even 80, 85% of what he was from like a speed perspective, I still think there was juice in the tank. But I'm kind of surprised that when you look at the ADP, that the fact that Mostert is still hanging, 14th, 15th round, I would have assumed then that meant Chase Edmonds was going in the 7th, 8th round. And that hasn't really been the case. It seems like there's massive uncertainty from drafters for this entire Miami backfield. And I kind of like the discount you're getting on Chase Edmonds now. I know you're routinely in this draft, he went in the 11th. And I don't even think that's too out of the ordinary for regular underdog drafts either, to go in the 10th, 11th round. So to me, he represents a great value in the sense that I think he will have a pass catching role. And then, in those situations where if Mostert gets hurt or Gaskin is hurt, I think Chase Edmonds could take on an expanded role. So I kind of like that hybrid. Hey, he'll get us some usable scores right out of the gate, and then also hopefully a little contingent upside as well.
We did mention Rojo, two other players that kind of fall into that bracket over the last couple of years that were hoping for that breakout, but it hasn't really happened. Nyheim Hines, more so that Jonathan Taylor is now there in Indianapolis, but the other one is Pollard with the Dallas Cowboys, and that there's a situation where Ezekiel Elliott is now dropping down draft boards into a place where maybe we thought he should have probably been going this time last year, but the market has reacted. But I don't know if we can have that full faith that Tony Pollard is going to eventually have that breakout that we really hope. How are you looking at the likes of Hines and Pollard as we head into the season? Are they viable zero RB candidates for you?
Yeah, I think they are. I mean, I guess I would say the difference between Pollard and Hines is there is a pretty big gap, between their ADPs. You can look at our RotoViz underdog draft. I mean, Pollard went to Dricko beginning of into the 9th round, and then Nyheim Hines went in the 15th round. So pretty big gap there. I think what's one of the subplots to drafting this year that I'm going to be really curious to see how it plays out is how people think of these pass catching archetype backs, because they had been kind of a bedrock of, zero RB portfolios where, you're grabbing some of your rookies, you're grabbing some of your pure handcuffs, but you need some of these usable weeks at the start of the season. And that would often come via your JD McKissicks, your Nyheim Hineses. Last year, I felt like that archetype kind of cratered in a way that a lot of people felt burned. And, this year I'm kind of wondering, are we going to get a really nice discount on these guys? I mean, even players like Darrington Evans last year, our friend Eric Beimfor kind of memed him into a much more expensive pick, but it was because you were selling yourself on that pass catching upside there. So, seeing Hines in the 15th, I'm still feel very confident in him as a player in that offense. I think Matt Ryan will be pretty friendly as far as a check down quarterback. So yeah, I'm ready to go back to the well on these guys, and kind of excited that we're going to get a little bit more of a pass catching discount than we maybe would have gotten in other years.
What about the massive league winners where, you look at Penny, who had, this just white hot run at the end of the season. He was a little bit more expensive at times, obviously, again in training camp, struggling with those injuries. They had some other guys like Alex Collins who were looking pretty good, kept him very inexpensive, even during the time period where, you had that kind of perfect group of backs that throughout the majority of draft season were pretty affordable. And then right when you get into August, these guys are going in rounds 11 or 12. Now, there are some specific weeks where Penny was expensive too, but then you have someone like Cordero Patterson, who was absolutely free, right? You have this guy who is big, extremely athletic, this pass catching back, but because the NFL hadn't, used that in any way, shape, or form for a decade, there was no reason to believe that suddenly that was going to happen, and it did. So kind of an unfair question, because obviously if we could see these things coming, then these people wouldn't be priced there. But do you have some guys do you like just extremely late? Do you think not only could be useful, but could actually be just monster league winners? And when I kind of look through, I mean, you have to really squint or to force yourself to believe on some of these guys, but there are some athletic players who are really cheap. Now, Ramondre Stevenson, not that expensive, but somebody who does kind of fit the mold of someone who could have a massive breakout. Then you've got some cheaper guys like Kenyon Drake, Chuba Hubbard, Deontay Foreman, Kenny Gainwell. I mean, you've got some real athleticism in that group. Are there some players at the very ends of drafts that you think, this guy could actually be an 18 point per game player, maybe at least for like a 5 or 6 game stretch?
Yeah, I've been taking stabs on different types of players. Obviously, been mixing in a decent bit of the rookies. I love that nugget that you passed along from Blair Andrews of saying upside is basically just a euphemism for how many rookies you've drafted. So I've been very conscious of making sure I'm sprinkling in those guys, even if I don't, have a good grasp on their situation or even what they are potentially as prospects. But I think some of the other types of players I've been looking at that could fit that mold would be, who are bounce back guys that had a rough year, but are still in potentially juicy situations. Trey Sermon has been a guy I've been willing to take stabs on, knowing that the draft capital and the interest was there from the 49ers. We've seen over and over their willingness to plug and play random running backs and have a lot of success. And I certainly prefer Eli Mitchell straight up. I don't know how you couldn't, but whether between injuries or things getting shuffled, I think there's still, a little hope. I'm leaving a candle on for Trey Sermon. And if you told me that, he finished as the lead back for the 49ers this year, I think you'd probably be a little stubborn to say you were surprised. I think that's within the range of outcomes, even if it's a lesser percentage. And then, I have been taking some of these, what I would consider true handcuffs that I think could have massive upside. Deontay Foreman is one. If we think that he does have the number 2 job there ahead of Chuba Hubbard, who's fallen out of favor, we've seen it. Why are people so afraid to draft McCaffrey this year? And why is he sliding to 1-4, 1-5 sometimes? It's because of that injury risk. And if that is true, then you would think on the flip side, Deontay Foreman would have a little bit more rich of an ADP with people trying to capture that upside. And I thought he looked good last year when he filled in for Derrick Henry. And I know we're not super excited on the Panthers offense as a whole, but I feel pretty good about what Foreman could do with, 15 plus touches a game. So yeah, I'd say that kind of buy low guys, some true handcuff guys, and then just praying that we're right.
And you mentioned the rookies, and in many ways we don't even know who they are yet. But who are some of the names that you like to get in there, even if you're not 100% sure about the player?
Yeah, and I'll be completely honest here. I am not super in the prospect weeds yet. I've been reading your guys' stuff, of course, hearing what Gretsch and Karain and Davis are saying. But honestly, I've been taking a bit of, I guess you would say, like a price sensitive spray and pray approach, in that, some of these rookies have become buzzy and trendy and have gotten pushed up. And then wondering, are they actually that different from some of the cheaper guys? So, I've been taking in our RotoViz draft, I just took Zamir White. He's a guy I have some shares of. I have a decent amount of, Rashad Whites, Kyron Williams, guys like that who I think if they land in the right spot, I think they could, have what we're looking for, which is a late season kind of surge as the rookie running back with fresh legs. So honestly, I've been pretty, I guess I would say prospect agnostic, but just making sure that I'm always grabbing at least 1 or 2 of these guys that, people are projecting to have some form of decent draft capital.
Did you enjoy that clip? Make sure you hit that subscribe button to get more content from RotoViz. And of course, you can check out full-length podcasts at rotoviz.com/podcast. Available on all podcast platforms. Check out our wide range of content. Once again, rotoviz.com/podcast.